get back to the boat, and the captain, and all the trip ticket information we have to capture when the fish comes in. But that industry is just kind of the sexy part. It's really not enough to hold up the seafood industry, but by kind of debuting it, I feel like that's an important part for just this area altogether, because tourism's huge here, and we're a small piece of this whole industry, and we support 25 families, and I know that a lot of fishermen and fish houses and all those things that feed into the fish on your plate, that kind of affects a lot of lives along the way. We were on a little show called Catching How that was on the Weather Channel for 10 weeks. It just finished up a couple months ago, but they did follow a lot of our spear fishermen around underwater, the guys that did Deadliest Catch. And you can see that on the Weather Channel where they're underwater spearing, well, hog in particular, because they won't take a line, you have to spear them, and grouper and other catch, and just kind of illuminated this area and this industry and the industry that we're in.
Can we move on to?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that was wonderful. That was great. How old are your triplets?
9, and the oldest is just turned 11.
Oh, wow. Okay. Anyway, Kelly.
I don't have triplets.
6 tuplets.
No, that's not happening.
I raised twins. I know a little bit about it.
Let's see, I graduated here in '93, but before I actually even graduated, I went to work over next door, and like Katie, I worked for Walt Japp and Jennifer Wheaton in their coral reef program for a couple of years, and actually at Jenny's urging, there was another position that came open in grants, and knowing nothing about grants, I looked at her and said, why do you think I would even be able to do that? She said, well, you can learn, and the opportunities over there at the time for advancement in that group was pretty slim because it was a small group and they were still working age. So I said, okay, let's try that. So unlike Al, who had a plan, I didn't really have a plan, but this came open and I applied, and what I did over there was to run a grants program. We had money coming in from the legislature to give out to applicants for marine resources research, so I ran that program, and we had a variety of university people and other state people. It's been so long, I don't even remember. Anyway, I did that for a number of years until the money ran out. Like everything else, the budgets were tight back then, as they are now. So that job morphed into working in the grants office with Linda Torres, Dr. Torres' wife, who got money from other agencies for the state. So I reversed roles a little bit and started working with our scientists over there on getting grants from Department of Interior agencies, mainly the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, particularly through their sport fish restoration program. They have a lot of different groups over there that get a lot of money from that program doing a wide variety of things. So I did that for another number of years, and one day I got a call from someone who used to work over there, who works now at NOAA, and said, there's a job opening over here that I think you might be interested in. I said, really? And so anyway, it turned out I went and talked to the woman who was supervisor, and I applied and eventually got the job. So it's kind of been a strange path in that I really hadn't set out to, other than the coral reef work, which is what I had interest in from my work here, everything else is kind of just, I don't want to say fell into my lap, but it's just kind of been happenstance that I was at the right place at the right time. So anyway, so what I do over at NOAA now is we have money appropriated through Congress to give or have people apply for work in the marine fisheries arena. So the grants that I mainly handle are more non-discretionary programs that result from actual acts of Congress, and that say you will give to so-and-so for this work. most of the people that I work with work at other state agencies, and actually I work with people over here now, so it's kind of come full circle. But we do also at NOAA have competitive grant programs available for other, I guess, more wide-ranging educational backgrounds, I guess you could think of. But those are handled by other people, so anyway, so that's what I've done. And I ended up working over here for about 18 years, and I've been at NOAA for about 7, so it's been interesting. Oh, and I met my husband here, not there, so.
Everybody knows her husband.
I don't know, maybe not.
Where is he? How come he's not here?
Hey, where is
Told him
he?
not to
Where is
come.
he anyway? Yeah.
No, our son has baseball games.
Oh.
Joe John Lace, her husband. Anyway, last but not least, Brad.
All right, thank you, Al. I got here sort of by a long route. I was an older graduate student when I started in 1980. I had graduated with a degree in biology from Southwestern College in Winfield, Kansas. I didn't see the ocean till I was 13 years old. Luckily, my parents moved to Hawaii when I graduated from high school. And because I didn't want to live at home, I stayed in Kansas, went to school, got a degree, went to the Boston University Marine program in Woods Hole for a year, and I was a dumb graduate student. The opportunities at Woods Hole were immense, and I didn't know enough to walk down the corridors and find the person I wanted to work with. I could have worked with Watson and Chevelle and done work on sperm whales around the world. Didn't do it. And as a result, because there were only 3 faculty there, I didn't find anybody on the Boston University program. I didn't find anybody I wanted to work with. So I ended up moving to Hawaii, taking early retirement, and living on Kauai in the Big Island for 5 years. But the bottlenose dolphins and the spinner dolphins captured me. I ended up working on a research project in Malibu. And when that sort of blew up, I decided I was going back to grad school so that I could run research programs. And wanted to do it in Florida because there were wild bottlenose dolphins that I wanted to work with. There was no program at USF Marine Science, so I told them I wanted to be an ichthyologist. And Jack Briggs took me on for the first semester. I aced the core courses and then said, by the way, I'm doing a thesis on marine mammals, and Jose Torres took me on. At the same time, I got lucky because John Reynolds had graduated from the University of Miami and went to Eckerd College, and he was a full-blown marine mammal professor and had all the contacts in the world. And he was an adjunct professor, and between Jose and John, they shepherded me through the program, and I funded my own research. And before I graduated in '87, I was on the 7-year plan because I was paying for it all myself. I worked at FIO though, and I worked.
I don't remember that plan.
For you were told you better graduate in 7 years, or we're not going to give you the degree.
I don't think we ever really met it.
Anyway, it worked to get me that. And I worked at Marine Lab for a year, and by the time I had some experience, I'd also volunteered over at the Marine Lab. Phil Steele was tagging blue crabs all over the bay, and I would ride with him so I could take photos of dolphins to finish my thesis off. They started a marine mammal program because they knew me. I was one of the top candidates, and I was basically hired as the first biologist into the marine mammal program at the Marine Lab. As such, I got to start a lot of the research programs that were going on, flying aerial surveys to count manatees, dolphins, whales. I contracted out the necropsy and salvage of dead manatees all over the state, so I got to know the SeaWorld people and the Marine Land people and the Miami Seaquarium people. And then I worked with Fish and Wildlife Service to start a satellite tagging program with manatees on the west coast of Florida, and we did a 7-year study that produced a volume with lots of maps. Along the way, when I got there, there was no GIS system. Ken Haddad was using remote sensing with satellite imagery, but when we took over the salvage of dead manatees, we got the Fish and Wildlife Service database, and if I used a raster database to plot it, I ended up with manatees on the interstate. And so I went to Ken, and he pointed me to PC ArcGIS, and I started the first GIS group at the lab, and we had to digitize the shoreline of Florida because there wasn't one. I spent 13 years doing research there, and they finally pissed me off to the point where I started looking. I had been running management and research split, and the management people went to Tallahassee, and so I had been basically running the research group and allocating money, and we finally got a research administrator spot, and they hired a PhD from outside. So I gave them 6 months notice and said aloha. Took a year off and found a job as a project manager with Greenhorn and O'Mara, an engineering firm out of the DC area, who had an office in St. Pete and was doing national wetlands inventory mapping for NWI. And they hired me as a project manager to come in and run to run Forest Service projects. They'd gotten a national contract to map for the Forest Service. And I have run that program for the last 15 years. We've gotten 3 successive IDIQ contracts to provide aerial services and LiDAR services and mapping services to the Forest Service. And as a result of that contract, we've gotten programs with the Bureau of Land Management. We have contracts with NOAA, USGS, Corps of Engineers. They didn't all come from the Forest Service, but I've gotten to work with various agencies over the years running mapping projects, probably 250 or more over the last 15 years. It's exciting because we have photoscience. Well, Greenhorn and O'Mara got bought by Photoscience, who got bought by Quantum Spatial last year. So now we have 250 to 300 employees across the country. They joined us with one of our rivals, Aerometric, out of Sheboygan, Wisconsin, and with Watershed Sciences, who flies LiDAR on the West Coast. So we have state-of-the-art technology to map both terrestrial and aquatic habitats. We have LiDAR, Bathy LiDAR, we fly for NOAA as well. And it's been interesting. It all came from developing a map system, because I had to put the dots on the maps by hand when I was doing my thesis. It was pretty pitiful. So that's where I've been. It's a pleasure to take what I learned at USF and scientific methods to other organizations. I mean, I've helped transform the Forest Service in GIS over 15 years. They have 9 regions, 9 GIS coordinators, and my job, I saw it as coordinating the coordinators and showing them what they needed to be doing to get their system up to speed. We manage the enterprise data warehouse for the Forest Service. I've got them building point clouds from stereo pairs so that we can, it's poor man's LiDAR. If you don't have enough to fly LiDAR, we can take any imagery back into the 30s, build a point cloud out of it, and map it in 3D.
It's fantastic. Anyway, the room's full of people with stories just like this. I see Chris here. She could probably rivet us with stories of USGS, horrify us with stuff. The same as Bruce and other people, and new graduates like Anna. And so I'm not quite sure, and Melanie. One of the things that struck me hearing the four of you speak was that a number of basic skills have a commonality through what you do. Leadership, you're all in leadership roles, okay? You're all articulate, okay? You have to be articulate to do what you do, that's for sure, right? You communicate effectively with people. You deal with a lot of people, okay? You mentioned 200 or 300, you mentioned, Kelly, 150 or 200, something like that. And Katie, you work with 30 in your company, is that right? Sure, and certainly Kelly is, obviously, in the leadership positions or supervisory positions, they certainly have to communicate with a lot of people. Okay, so that's something we don't teach here. so somehow that evolved, the seed was planted here perhaps, or not, I don't know. You've had administrative abilities, I mean, good gosh, you've all had, maybe be administrators one way or the other, you're not just, laboratory rats, you work with a variety of different administrations and types of administration, and you all have people skills. So that's something that's really kind of essential. So that kind of struck me as being a commonality. Gosh, does anyone have a great story? I mean, young guy, you're a graduate of the program, so I mean, a lot of, you want to say anything? You're all biologists. How come we didn't turn geologists into women?
I was chemistry, so I was going to say, Chris, I remember her sitting in the conference room studying for her comps. I have never seen somebody go between frustration, anger, and depression on my bathroom breaks. I mean, I'd come out of my office and she'd be like this. I'd come out of the office and she'd be like this. I'd come out of the office and she'd just be like, and I'd just check in and say, you gonna be okay?
Well, that's all
The hilarious thing is, I had no memory at that time, because like traumatic events, you block them out, so I don't remember any of that.
But I remembered it so clearly when I was just looking right at you. I was just like, oh my God, I remember her in the conference room, just all of her stuff spread everywhere and just mayhem.
I never knew more than when I walked in the door to take my comps. And then as the day went on, I could feel it all sort of leaking away, and I knew I would never have that much information all in one place at one time ever again.
What was it, a worthwhile experience? The comprehensive exam?
Nice face.
Yes and no. I mean, it forces you to sit down and really consolidate what you think you need to know. The part that I think is less worthwhile is you sort of have no idea what's going to be asked of you, and in some ways you have the sense that people are going to yank your chain and may ask you utterly random things that are not immediately relevant to what you're doing. And so you have to cast this wide net and cram a lot of things into your head that you will never need to know again, and I can skip that part.
Yes. So it was the experience, not the content of it.
Well, nobody died. I mean, me or my committee.
Chris, unfortunately, we had a situation in which one of the committee members died on the way to a committee, to a oral, so,
Well, does anyone else want to share a story? I mean, this isn't just, yes, Helen.
I have a question.
Mary, sorry.
I think that a lot of people in this room, either because they're about to graduate, have graduated, or job searching and are curious to know what you as hiring managers are looking for in potential employees or peers that they could, that maybe they are already getting, that you guys know that they're already getting from the College of Marine Science, or maybe they could get outside of the College of Marine Science.
And to be honest,
Yeah, please be.
10 years ago you asked me this question, I'd have a different response. But now, we had some job openings for some entry-level scientists this year, which is really kind of rare. They actually added positions, and there were 99 applicants for the environmental specialist one. Okay. It is incredibly difficult for a hiring manager when, 99 applications laying in front of me and the team, literally took 10 people, and I was like, 10, okay, go through them, and what we're going to do is you pick your top two, and then we'll discuss. The technical skills in those applications were really not enough to separate out the people. That everybody has that. You take the same coursework. The things that separated people out were the individuals who took it upon themselves to volunteer with an organization where they got some hands-on experience, where they had an internship or something else that grabbed our attention. But really, when we pull people in for the interviews, it is people skills, team skills, and values. I have had the experience over 15 years of hiring some people I wish I never had. and they no longer work in the group. That what they say about one rotten apple spoiling the bunch, it is true. And when you've got, in my original group, the watershed management group, we were 25, very tight-knit, we're all scientists, and we went through the government upheaval of losing our department, getting shuffled, but as we moved, wherever they put us together as a team, we were a team. And even though things were just catastrophically changing around us and our bosses got let go and all this, because we worked so well together, those things didn't impact us as much. And when you don't have somebody on the team who's really there for the team, it has a much bigger impact. And so when we're interviewing, we ask some pretty detailed questions about team experiences, and not even nice ones either. We usually ask the bad ones, tell us what your worst experience working on a team was, and what did you learn from that experience? Things like that really we're trying to see best fit. Because to be honest, when you got 99 applications sitting in front of you with all the same degrees and the same classes, it's the people who went out and said, I'm going to volunteer with Tampa Bay Watch, or actually, we have a lot of people come through our office. We got 24 interns right now with USF, and they come in. We know them, so they all got interviews because we know they've been here, they've interned with us for a year, so we know their personalities, we know they already fit. So that's the kind of stuff that really we look for. And
Would you say networking?
Networking is
so
good.
They had another opportunity to meet with you and get to know you, maybe not for an internship, but for another, say, a networking happy
Well,
hour
I'll
or
tell you,
something
a lot of people think they know what they want. They think they know what they want. Like I said, 24 USF interns, mostly from Tampa. Actually, we have some St. Pete College in there too, coming through this past year. And I will say 50% learned coming through our offices that they thought that was what they wanted to do, and that is not it. They got to experience absolutely everything. Whatever they wanted to experience, they got to experience. If they wanted to work in the biological monitoring program, that's what they did. They're out in the field counting bugs and doing all this stuff, and they come back in and say, I don't really like that. And then, so, okay, what do you want to try now? And, we try to fit them for their period of time, whatever that is. Usually it's something like 120 hours where they want to be, so that they get that experience, so they can just make a decision. Because there's nothing worse than, I've had employees literally, we thought we had a good fit, we thought they knew what they wanted, and 30 days later come into my office crying because they're like, I hate this. And I'm like, well, then you need to find something else. Because neither you or I are going to be happy, and I don't want you to be unhappy. So it's good to get out there and try this stuff on for size, because if you think you know what you want and you've actually never done it, you might be